Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mensch, and I'm the guy they call the Smoker Broker. Hope everything's going well. Happy Thursday to you. Running through to the weekend. Hope everything's going good. I'm not even going to go through my typical Brent. Come on in here, Mark. Brent, put Brent in. Brent, what's going on? What are we doing out there? How are things going? What do you know? You do the opening for once.
Thanks. I mean, just put me on the spot. It's cool. I don't know. Things are good. I mean, I'm starting to see a lot of normalization of the market out there. People are back showing. Not much fear out there as far as in the consumers' eyes. I mean, there's still precautions, masks and whatnot, social distancing, but I mean, the market's hot right now.
So that's why I wanted to do something different. I want to go through my typical dumb spiel. And that's why I wanted you to start off, because that's a good thing. This morning the news talks about a massive resurgence, back with the COVID. So it's like this thing it just won't go away. And it is interesting. Even I thought that it was kind of fading off, and it's not fading off. It's interesting how we're dealing with it. Truly a once in a lifetime event that we're having to scale back and forth on what we do. I mean, I've become more comfortable, but even this morning, I'm like, God, how comfortable, I guess, do we have to be at this point? I mean, I read the news out of Houston, and God, they're saying that the hospitals are filled. So it's strange. It's really weird, from a level. Now, from a business standpoint and real estate confidence standpoint, you're 100% right. And the market's absolutely confident right now. There's no problem there. I think everybody has susceptible to the fact that we know this thing's out there, but life goes on. It's becoming very annoying to have it just festering out there. And I think
we're going to see a huge shift in the market as far as people wanting to go out and get property where they're not next to their neighbors and on top of each other. I'm seeing a ton of people asking about getting some land, moving out further.
So I'll give a tip to everybody that's out there. We do takeaways from the show. And a lot of people would argue that these are secret things that we do or private things that we do to help our particular group. But quite honestly, it's common sense, and everybody should be doing it. If you're watching our show, you should be reaching out to friends in bigger cities and telling them that that's a viable option at this point. And we do, in fact, see a surge in people asking to move out of New York City, Los Angeles, Houston, big metropolitan areas, to have more rural. In Dallas, Fort Worth, we're very fortunate. We have a lot of land that surrounds the Dallas, Fort Worth area. And you could still commute into Dallas, Fort Worth, even really an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of it, which some people do. So in Texas, you really have the chance to purchase, 5 to 10 acres of land and still be close into Dallas, Fort Worth. And you're going to see a lot of people. So the guys on our show, especially our team, our Keller Williams groups that watch, and all the other brokers that are out there, you're going to start seeing places like Crum, Ponder, Sunnyvale, Waxahachie, Midlothian. You're going to start seeing those areas really start to grow.
We almost put an offer on some in a property out there. It's cheap, and you get 2 acres for like $60,000.
Well, if we didn't have our business, if I didn't have to be central where we're at, I promise you, I would have been up in the Sanger Crum area. I mean, honestly, you can buy a really nice house up in Sanger and Crum, 5 acres for sometimes under $300K. I mean, a lot of times it's $400K. Hey, look, Andre's out there down in Austin, so that's good. We got one of our Austin guys down there. He's watching right now, and he's saying that he's seeing the same thing out in Austin. Now, that's a unique conversation. And we have an Austin team, so we have a large Austin group that watches the show every once in a while too. We are starting to see that. Austin has been begging for years for people to move out. I hesitate the way I say this. Austin's a very special place to me. I have a lot of friends down there, and it's been a part of my life, since I was a child. And Austin was always a very special, awesome, cool city. And it still is, but it's really, it's different than it used to be. It's not the same Austin inside of Austin. Now, that doesn't take away from the beauty of Austin. The point I'm making is it's expanding outside of it. And you have these suburbs like Georgetown, and they're building out. 20 years ago, they thought Round Rock was too far north of Austin. Well, my God, now they're looking at Georgetown. You might as well be in Temple and consider it a suburb of Austin. So that's a great point. And for our crews down in Austin, that should be something that you're looking at as well. You know, Jim McCauley's down there. He works with a new construction builder, and they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing people push out and buying homes well outside the Austin metro area. So this is going to be a trend that we see. I've been pounded on the guys, telling them that they need to be creating marketing and ad space in those cities, especially with people they know, telling them.
What's going to happen with that train when we get that train that goes from Dallas down there? I mean, is that going to open up a lot more because people can just jump on a train on the way? Who knows? You know,
Brent, while I'm thinking about it, I've already sent it out, but we need to pressure the guys more on those ads in other cities that we need to start making them do it. We need to start saying, you need to reach out not only to your friends and family, but to even stranger ads out there saying, hey, look, if you live in this particular city, like that conversation we just had, that's a good one. That's one to tell people, hey, you really ought to consider moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Austin area, not necessarily in the city, but in the suburb areas. You know, you did an ad a few weeks ago where you showed what a house in California, the same price looks in Texas, and that was great. But now I'm starting to wonder whether you do an ad that actually has one of those 5-acre plots that are further north. And say, look at this. You can get this regular all across the perimeter of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Well, and you may get people in the LA area that they're not ready to make a move yet, you know, but if they want to grab something and hold on to it and eventually.
So, that's a good point too. Maybe the ad should also say, if you're not ready, then there's nothing that stops you from purchasing this land when you do become ready. And, you know, I tell you, anybody that's on this show, you're getting Brent's the director of ops for our company. This conversation we would have privately, you know, so you guys are sharing on the same thing.
There'd be more swear words.
What's that?
There'd be more swear words in it, but it'd be private.
Swear words, probably. Yeah. Sometimes I swear on the radio, but definitely more swear words involved. But this is a conversation we talk about the takeaways that we have on the show. And even when we have open dialogue like this, excuse me, we let y'all benefit from it just as well, because that's the whole purpose of the show, is that you're learning something, whether it's basic or higher level. And this is certainly a higher level conversation. But I'm always a believer there's enough pie out there for everybody. We don't have to share. We don't have to hide things from each other. You know, some of the bigger wigs in Keller Williams, you know, some of the high profile agents, you know, guys like Ben Kinney and that run massive teams. I've always loved their philosophy. They go through and they'll tell you their tricks. And Ben Kinney's really big about. He says, "I'll tell him he won't do a damn thing, but I'll tell you what they are." So I love Ben personally, because he's such a smart guy and strong business guy. But that's a real true statement. And I've learned a lot from him on that. When I talk about things, I'm like, hey, you know, that's fine. We'll show you how to do it. We'll talk to you about it. But whether you do it or not, that's a whole nother thing. So to me, there really isn't anything about privacy or, you know, or quiet things that we hold within the group, especially inside Keller Williams. We want all the Keller Williams folks out there to do well. And even if you're another brokerage, fine, you benefit from watching the show. So,
but you should join us anyways.
What's that? And
you should join us anyways.
Yeah. You know, that's a fine line I walk on the show. I do want to encourage any brokerage to watch. Of course, we recruit inside for Keller Williams and the SWR group, but I mean, still, it is good. We have a lot of brokerages that watch the show, and that's fine. You know, we are kidding when we talk. We want people to actually watch.
Not everybody can be the best.
Yeah, not everybody. That's right. But hey, Mike, you made it finally. Mike, Mr. On Time Dallas down there, man. I tell you, don't know what we do without him. Yeah. Mike, how are you, buddy?
Good, man.
Good. It's good to see you. So we're going to talk about we had a conversation a few weeks ago about the listing presentation, and we probably got a third of the way through. So I told you I don't like doing the shows back to back because I don't like the same topics every week. So I'll do one, then I'll 3 or 4 weeks later, I pick back up. I always make notes where we stopped. So I want to kind of bring back in that conversation. It's an important one. You know, we are selling a lot of houses. A lot of people are getting their houses back on the market. So it's very relevant for the agents out there who are going through and doing listing presentations that they watch the show. Again, this is probably a better show geared towards the newer agent, but for a lot of existing agents, especially in that 3 to 6 year time frame, it's good for them too to reassess, hey, am I doing that, or am I doing the right things? The last time we stopped, we were at right about where we went through. We were at the house doing the listing presentation. We went through the CMAs. We did the initial conversations and the walkthrough, but then we stopped when we started getting towards the technical side of it, the financial side, the net sheets, the actual inputs of the documents that we're signing. So we're going to talk about that for the next 45 minutes or so, and be very, very informative for those people who are new or coming in to the system. So we go through the listing presentation. We first go through our comps. We then go through our what we can do for them. Then we go through our expectations, and then we kind of finalize where we start talking to them about the finance side, which is the net sheet. You know, if you want to talk about the most simplistic listing appointment ever, this is how it would go. Hey, my name's Robert Mesh. I work for the SWR Group at Keller Williams. Your house is worth $300,000 and it's going to cost you 6%. Thank you. Let me know if we can use you. And then you walk out, because in the end, that is all the seller cares about.
Yeah.
The seller wants to know how much is their house going to sell for and how much is it going to cost.
And how great their house is.
What's that?
How great their house is too. They want to
know that. House is too. Yeah. Never met a seller who didn't think their house is better than everybody else. Now, the problem with this, that's all they want. But I'm going to tell you right now, when we tell them, that's not what they're going to like. And these are the two most things that they want, and it's the two worst things they're going to hear, because they never believe that the price we give is the right one, and they always think it's higher. And they certainly aren't going to like the cost conversation. So these are two ugly things that we're about to tell somebody. It's always funny when a new agent gets a listing, they're so excited. I'm like, you won't be that excited once you do it. It's not, you're not going to enjoy dealing with it. It is one of the most difficult things we deal with when we're dealing with a new agent, is making them understand the listing process, because it is the hardest thing we do.
Yeah.
You really can't just give a script that says this is how you do it. It changes every time. 20 years into this, I still get thrown off sometimes by a comment that somebody makes or something that they want done. You know, so I'm always in a little bit of disbelief too. And so the environment is always changing, and it's very difficult to narrow down, exactly what's going to happen. So we have to work to prepare them for what they're going to see when they go in there. It's not pleasant. The seller doesn't enjoy the net sheet. In fact, here's another takeaway from the show, because we try really hard to do that. I prefer that the finance part is the last thing we talk about. Anybody know why, from a common sense standpoint, that I don't talk about the finance part in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, they'll stop listening to you.
They'll stop listening to me. They'll stop listening to me if I tell them how much the house is worth and how much it's going to cost to sell it. They're done with me, because that's all they wanted in the beginning. And then the worst part is they're not going to like those two answers. So then they're not even going to listen to the justification that I gave as to why they should be okay with this. So that's the last thing you want to do. That's a really good tip. It took me probably 5 or 6 years before I figured out I got to stop doing that. And you're going to find some sellers.
It took you 5 years to figure that out?
What'd you say, Dallas?
It took you 5 years to figure that out?
It did. I'm not lying. That's a true statement. Hey, don't even get into this shit I figured out years down the road. It's embarrassing. Hey, I don't mind telling anybody. I'm a pretty upfront guy. I don't care about what people. I tell my goods and my bads. I'm not embarrassed to tell everybody. It took me 7 years before I figured out how intermediary really worked. That's a true statement. I swear to God, it's a true statement. I actually thought that if you were over both, if you had the listing client and then a buyer customer came in and you did the deal and they didn't have another agent, I just assumed that was intermediary. I did for the longest time, because nobody ever told me that's not how that works. That's just a customer client relationship there. But I thought, well, no, there's no other agent, so I'm over both of them. I'm not over the other person. They're not even a client. It took me 7 years before that.
I assume this episode's not sponsored by Champions, right?
Well, look, it's not that. Champions is outstanding in teaching they're there to get you through the test. And that's a difficult task they have.
Yeah.
But they are touching on things that are going to be much bigger down the road and take a much longer conversation. And that's one of them. I mean, it's a struggle. So yeah, to your point, 5 years, 7 years, 20 years, there's still things that I see that I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what we're supposed to do with that. This business is very humbling. No matter how strong you are, how experienced you are, there's always something that's going to come up that we're like, I'm just not so sure that's how we need to do this. So those two components really need to be at the end, which is what we're talking about right now, is getting towards that net sheet. You know, it might sound like that's the obvious. It's not the obvious for a lot of agents. A lot of sellers, and this is what we were talking about, a lot of sellers will push you from right when you walk in. Well, how much do you think it's worth?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know right now. You have got to push that conversation off the best you can until you've explained everything. Now, sometimes they're just going to ask and they're not going to let you get off the hook. Then you tell them. You just flat out say, well, look, this is what it is, but you got to listen to why, because it won't make sense until you listen to me. So you got to do that if you're going to do that, but you got to try to stay away from it. I'll give you another takeaway that's helped me over the years. It's always a good idea when you're a listing agent, before you go into the actual appointment, you should do a little fishing with that seller. You should actually say, hey, I'm just curious, what do you think it's worth? Because you would like to know from a ballpark perspective where their mind is. Because you want to know when you tell them what it's worth, is it going to just like, are they going to lose it on you? Now, the smartest seller in the world, when you ask that of them earlier, the good response would be, well, why the hell are you here then? Because they're going to be like that. They want the answer from you. But a lot of sellers will say, well, I thought it would probably sell for this. And by the way, if you're a seller who watches our show, there's nothing wrong with you telling us what you think. We are going to tell you what the house is worth regardless. A lot of people think when they tell us what it's worth that they've messed up because now they've persuaded us. You didn't persuade me a bit. I just want to know where your head is. Mm-hmm. I just want to know, if I tell you, if you think it's 500, I'm about to tell you 400. I want to know that that's what I'm about to face when I get in there. So a lot of times it helps do a little fishing if you can to do that. Brent,
usually before you actually get to the appointment.
Yeah.
What's that?
Usually before you actually get to the appointment, you better know that.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying before, even when the initial conversation started, I'd be like, well, I'm just curious. What do you think it's worth? Where are you kind of feeling? That's exactly right. Maybe even if it's a week or two before, that's something that we're going to be looking at.
Last year I had a listing presentation, and I had just gotten the new Keller Williams listing presentation, right? And it's a big one. And, I took all this time and studied it, and I sit down with these people. I didn't know them. And the very first question, I start talking, and then he goes, hey, I'm just going to stop you right there. I want to know, what's the cheapest commission you can take? And I was, luckily I'd been doing this for at the time, like 9 years. And so I just managed to delay him. But I mean, for a new agent, that'll throw you.
That's the hardest thing. It is. We train our guys. I mean, I'm biased. I think we train our guys better than anybody. I say that all the time. I mean it. But that's something I can't simulate some off the wall scenario that's going to happen. So at some point, common sense does have to set in as to, well, how do I respond? Now, I'll give you a tip on that too. This is a general business conversation. If you get to where somebody ever asks you something that's so off the wall and you don't know what the answer is, or you're fearful of what the answer is, you immediately always tell them, hey, let me get back with you on that. Do not try to fake your way through it. Don't try to guess. That's the dumbest thing you can do, is try to act like you know what you're doing. You just point blank say, let me get back with you on that, because you do not want to make a weird answer or an incompetent one when someone's asking something like that, right? Okay, so on the net sheet, so we've gone through all these things. Now we have finally got to the finance part. Mike, Brent, y'all walk us through what the net sheet looks like, how it goes. What's the premises for the net sheet itself?
What's a net sheet?
We can maybe fit this out, man.
Well, we should have been more
I
prepared,
expected-
Brent.
I expected Dallas to say that.
No,
Mike's taking notes right now. I need to make sure I
Oh.
remember.
I wrote that down. I wrote net sheet down.
I mean, the net sheet that you created, it's one of the most simple tools, and it's not flashy at all.
I
But-
still use it.
I use it too.
I still use
And
it.
the funny thing is,
Wait, tell them why though. Tell them what the regular net sheet looks like and why we do that.
you mean your net sheet? Or
No, like a
I don't
general.
know. I've
how
never seen
absurd
it.
it is.
I don't know. I've never used one. I've only used yours.
Well, good.
Those apps are hard to use.
Well,
Yeah.
look, the apps are hard to use.
Yeah.
See, Dallas is on here for a reason. He gives some good, the apps, they are difficult to use. And the bottom line is they put all that detailed crap in there. Man, nobody's going to understand that. You don't need
even know what to choose.
detail. What's that, Mike?
Don't even know what to choose.
Yeah, you don't
Some of those
need to
drop-down menus.
detail every piece
Where
of
is
the
it, Mike?
net sheet. There
Where
are
is
4 or 5 major components. That is what you look at. There are some things I do bad and there are some things I do good. I'm going to tell you, I've always felt good about the way we do the net sheet. First of all, I guarantee you, I'm rarely that far off when I quote somebody. If I have the right numbers,
Yep.
I'm rarely off by $1,000 either way. And that's not the easiest thing to do. So
No.
these guys are going to tell you it's very simple. In fact, just tell them, Brent, sales minus, just go through it and tell them what it is.
Yeah.
Take a
So, I
note.
mean, it's a real simple, just Excel spreadsheet, but you plug in the sales price estimated, right? And I usually say, this is if you're asking whatever, $250, maybe they'll offer $245. You subtract 1% of the sales price for the title policy, plus about $500 for home warranty, minus taxes for the year, minus their commissions that they're going to pay out, minus I think I said taxes,
Payoff.
right?
Payoff.
Payoff. There you go, and then that's your net. And it's funny because every time I get the initial CD that comes in from title, I always think to myself, "Oh God, I hope I'm not way off." Just because I don't want to sell it. Like, no, where's the money? And it's always either dead on or they're getting more money than I originally promised them.
So here's the thing too, and this is where you're confident when you utilize the net sheet the way we do. I can tell you this, if it's off, then there's either a mistake from the title company that they miscalculated our commission, or the seller didn't give me a proper
Payoff.
I know when I see it, I'm like, that's not right. I go, there's something not right. And I go, I'm always within of that. So it builds your confidence because see, Brent's right. I used to be scared when that came in. I'm like, God, I hope it's close.
But still,
Someone who's financially concerned. But over the years, I got to where it was right so many times. And I'm like, well, I know if it's off, one of those 2 things is missing. So it builds your confidence when you talk to somebody. You're like, well, I know it's going to be pretty damn close to that. Now, so I'm going to recap that for everybody who's taking notes out there. Sales minus the realtor fees, minus the title fees, minus the prorated taxes, minus any type of debt or payoff you have on the house equals your net. The realtor commissions are going to be whatever percent the total is. So if you're charging 6%, it's both agents. The title components, it's typically 1% plus 500. We do the plus 500 because we believe that 1% plus the 500 gets all those little detailed items, and it pretty much covers for them. Another point to make about the prorated taxes, you always need to make sure, and this is important too, you always need to make sure when you're talking to your seller, if they escrow their taxes and insurance, which most people do, the title company is going to take out their taxes that are owed up to that close date and their insurance. They're going to take it and they're going to take the taxes at least. They're going to take those taxes and pay them. So it's going to be a decrease. Your money's going to be taken away at close of the taxes you owe. Now, you should know that your lender has been building an escrow for you. You have a lending amount, You have an escrow with your taxes that's been sitting. So if you pay the taxes already, they have to give that back to you.
Yeah, it's a nice little surprise they get,
Well, so I'm glad you said it like that. Hopefully it's not a surprise because we should tell them.
Right. But
this number is actually lower because you should get this back 3 or 4 weeks later once this closes out. So you have to tell them your original quote is going to be off by that amount. And sometimes when we do the net sheet, I just tell them, I'm like, hey, if you escrow taxes, I'm not even going to include it in your net agreement. Just know that when this amount comes in, it's going to be lower, but we're telling you that we know that's going to come back to you. Okay. So you need to address that, because that could be a big $5,000 or $6,000 gap. And we need to be able to tell them why that's there. So that's an important takeaway off of the net sheet. All right. Before I forget, I always want to thank our sponsors. We've got a really good one, Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. He does an outstanding job for us. We have many inspectors that we can choose from. We always give 2 to 3 out there as alternatives, but I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that we really do push Martin, just because we've never had any issues with them in all the years we've utilized them. The SWR group is one of the largest, if not the largest, in Keller Williams at 130 agents, and we press to all of our agents out there. They really should be utilizing him when it comes through for an inspection. You can contact Martin at 817-401-3240. His number's right down there right now. And I think the thing I love about Martin more than anything is his bedside manner. He still gets the information out in a very proper way, but he also tells us that this is exactly what's going to happen without scaring us. So we really love it. Appreciate you being a sponsor of the show. Appreciate your friendship and your professionalism in doing the job that you do for us. Once again, BPG Inspections, Martin Cooley, his information is down below. All right, so got the net sheet. We're past that. Let's start talking about some of the paperwork that we go through. Now, we're not going to have a conversation about the paperwork in general, okay? Because those are actually separate shows in itself. But let's go through the initial paperwork that we're going to talk to them about. So, Mike, Brent, go ahead and tell them the initial, off the top of your head, what are some of the documents we're going to have them sign when we are at the listing appointment?
When we have signed, the actual agreement in itself.
Mike, Brent made sure he waited for you. He's like, I want to make sure Mike knows that what. Go ahead. Tell them what the docs are, you guys.
Well, we got to have the actual agreement in of itself.
All right. The agreement. So you have the listing agreement, right?
Yeah, the listing agreement itself.
Which is going to bind, which is going to officially make us their agent. So now we have a client relationship. That's important to know about the listing agreement. They're no longer a customer at that point. They have become a client because they've agreed to everything in there. What are some of the other documents?
Well, IABS we're going to do.
Tell the general public what that is so they don't think it's a stomach virus or anything. What is the IABS? What does it stand for?
I mean, that's disclosure of agency, and you're letting them know, that their rights as a consumer, they have rights to representation, to have a real estate agent or not to have one. We also make sure we try to do it in advance if we can, but we try to get them the seller's disclosure in advance. They never fill it out in advance. Yeah. If they do, you're in luck. You got a good seller. But usually it's like, oh yeah, I'll get to it later.
I like the, I want to go a little bit further on the IABS. The IABS is like a Miranda rights for home buyers and home sellers. It basically tells you, you have the right to be represented this way. You have the right to be represented that way. You have the right to represent yourself. But anything you say, it can and will be used against you. It is. The IABS is kind of a Miranda rights. We talk about this on our agency show, which I really believe is one of the best shows that we do from an informative standpoint, because so many people don't understand agency. We talk
Nobody
a lot
understands
about
agency.
IABS. What's that, Mike?
Nobody understands agency.
No, it does. And, it's so hard. I've been a long-time instructor, and there is no doubt that it is the most difficult piece for a real estate agent to understand is the agency side. And just to show you how the show flows very well, what we were joking about earlier about me not understanding that the first 7 years, the reason why I started expertising in it is I could not stand not knowing anymore. I could not stand not understanding. You have no idea how many calls I've made to Trek, to TAR, to make sure I understood what sub-agency meant, what intermediary meant. So many people don't understand it. It's amazing to me. And look, I'll go out on a limb. This isn't an official a number, but I'm telling you right now, I can be a gambling guy at times, and I'm telling you, I would bet an easy $10,000 right now that probably I would say less than 30% of the active agents really would be able to pass an agency test, and that number might be too generous. It might be less than that, because I'm telling you, there are way too many people out there that don't know. You had a fun conversation. Sometimes I have to be the broker record for our office, and I get to see the stuff I used to see all the time coming through, flowing through. And yesterday we had a 15-year agent who had, and I'm not going to describe it because I don't want it to be public, but they had an issue that probably has happened to me 1,000 times, but it was her first time she'd ever seen it. I'm like, you're kidding me. She's like, no. She goes, it's never happened before. You can go a long time in this business and not have certain things happen to you. So it really is amazing sometimes when you hear someone talk about these types of things. You're like, I can't believe you've never seen this. I love the IBS show. I love the agency show. Mark's talking about to let the client know how much we walk away financially with. So emphasizing the net sheet, talking about the importance of the seller's disclosure. Mark knows that we have to have the seller's disclosure out there as well. So let me expand on the seller's disclosure too for the agents that are watching. The seller's disclosure, that's a real sacred document as well, because like it or not, that is the one document and the only document that we can present in court that if a seller lied about something that's wrong in their house, that's the only way we can be dismissed from the lawsuit, is to say, we did not sign that seller's disclosure. We went off the information they gave us. That's all we can do. It's on them. It's not on us. The number one way, and really the only way an agent ever gets sued, is through deceptive trade practices. And that document there is the number one savior of any real estate agent, is saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is what they signed. That is all I'm aware of. That document is huge. So yeah, the seller's disclosure is a big one as well. What else to say? We talked about the listing agreement, the IABS, the seller's disclosure. Are we missing any of the other smaller ones?
I mean, there's general info.
Yeah, general information. You have wire fraud. It's interesting, the mineral clauses. So in Texas, I know we have a lot of people that watch across the country. In Texas, we have a significant amount of natural resources below, a lot of natural gas and oil under Dallas-Fort Worth. So mineral rights become a question sometimes, even though in the last few years they haven't, because gas prices have been down. But when they do come up, it's amazing how many people don't disclose just the information that there could be an issue with mineral rights. A lot of brokerages don't even mention it. And I'm surprised by that. I'm still a fan of the information about mineral rights document. I still think that's a document that should be pushed out, but it's not required by a lot of people. So I find that interesting. Yeah, Mark's got another one. Of course, the lead-based paint. So we don't give the lead-based paint for everyone. No. But of course, if the house is older than 1978, we're going to have that lead-based paint renee. And I like how Mark put that in there, because we don't necessarily do that at the listing appointment, but we really should. If we know the house is 1970, why are we waiting? That seller should fill out that disclosure so that when we do get an offer, we're ready to give it. So I like Mark putting that on there. That's not on a lot of checklists, but nonetheless, it should be. It actually should be on. It should be on the checklist. I'm thinking about it. You should have the damn thing on there if it's prior to 1978. Those of you who watch that are in pre-testing, we have a lot of agents that are watching right now that are coming on board that are about to pre-test. That's a good test question. What's the year that you have to have a lead-based paint? 1978. Including 1978 prior to. That's always a good test question too. If it's 1978, do you have to have it? All right. What else? What are some other things? Do we get them all?
Well, no, not about documents, and I don't know if you want to get into it later, but something I do before I even have them go through the listing or the listing agreement and sign is I walk the house, I walk the property with the seller. Right. Two things. One, you get them to point out what they like about the house. But if you really want to make yourself be a good resource for them and look like you know what you're doing, walk the outsides. You're pointing out things that they're going to need to fix. Go up if you want to. You don't have to do it, but if you can just poke your head up in their attic, just kind of look around, just to let them know this is going to be stuff that's going to come up and it's going to save them money.
I do the same thing too, but I do it for another reason. I like to look at the seller in the eyes and know if they're lying or not. Like sometimes if I can sense something's been done, I'll make a jarring comment like, hey, what's going on with that? I might already know what happened, but I want them to tell me.
Is that when they're cooking dinner? You just point that out?
Well, yeah. I want to make sure that they're being very honest with me, because I don't care whether they're honest with me as much as it is them getting in trouble for themselves.
Yeah.
Because I know certain things, like, for instance, if you're walking a foundation and you see a lot of just spare dirt over there, it looks like there was landscaping there at one point, but it's been long enough that it's kind of covered up. But you're like, well, why is it like that? And good chance that they put some piers in there and they just politely forgot that those piers were in there. So a lot of times you might make comments like that. I always joke about when I teach, we can't show it here, but you always have to state the obvious. If you're talking to a seller and you're in the kitchen and you're talking to them like this, and you're like, hey, have you guys checked out the foundation? I'm just curious. And my left foot's like a foot under my right foot. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of jar them with, hey, where are we at with this? So I like walking it with them too.
Well, and if you see step cracks in the brick outside and you see that they've tried to paint over it.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that's not a good idea. Y'all, most stair stepping itself, if that's the only problem, that doesn't mean there's a foundation issue. Remember, foundation is a conglomerate of issues.
There's movement.
Stair stepping, it's windows that are hard to open, doors that swing, horizontal cracks, sheetrock, put all those things together indicate there might be a problem. It's always one of my favorite things where, especially in Texas, someone looks up at the corner and they see a little spider crack. They're like, oh, we have foundation issues. I'm like, they all got it. They all do. Another favorite one is on the foundation. It is very typical to have the corners crack because so much pressure is on there. Like, oh, this foundation. That is rarely a foundation issue, just because you have pieces of the cement or the mortar that's fallen off on the foundation side. So a lot of people get too paranoid about that. There's nothing wrong with that.
You also got to look for the bricks that are sheared.
Yep, sheared bricks, compressed bricks that have pushed in, especially near the center of the house.
Expansion joint.
Pushing down. A lot of we probably should bring on one of the foundation guys and have along. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and note that. That's a good. We've never done that one before. A foundation show. There's a lot of people who have questions on that. That's probably a good one. I'm surprised, as long as we've been doing the show, we haven't done that one yet, because that probably could take a good 2 hours to discuss that.
Mm-hmm. Well, nothing scares buyers away more than foundation anyways.
What's that?
Nothing scares buyers away more than foundation and roof.
Especially in Texas, which I'm going to tell you about that too. So, which is why I think this needs to be a show, because now that I'm talking about it, there's a lot of stuff. I used to be one of those buyers that was like, well, I'm not, but there's foundation, I'm out.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've changed that opinion. As long as it's not extensive foundation work, I don't have a problem with that. In fact, sometimes I might be comforted by it. At least someone addressed it before I found out on my own, Yeah. If you get a quality foundation company to go in there and repair that, you're probably good. Now, I'll tell you what scares me the most is when you go into a foundation-prone area. Like we have, if you look at the geographic locations, and you look at the the soil conditions in Dallas-Fort Worth, those people that are in that central core of the Colony, Castle Hills, Irving, Las Colinas, Carrollton. Those are epicenters for very hard soil. For anybody watching that lives there, relax. They're great areas. You just have to know that your probability of having a foundation issue is probably higher in those particular areas. I get scared if I go into an area like Carrollton and I'm buying a pre-existing home that's 20 years old that hasn't had the foundation repair. I'm worried about that. I go, that's almost impossible in that area for that thing not to have some type of work. And so sometimes I'm actually encouraged when I see foundation work. I used to be totally scared by that. Now I'm like, that's all right. See, Mark says, I'm guilty of never discussing a price reduction strategy with my clients. If the house hasn't sold in 30 or 60 days, you should set the expectation with the seller to reduce the price. I've lost a few clients because I did not do that. And, Mark's a very honest guy there. He knows that he's taught to tell those people, look, there's a damn good chance it's not going to sell at this price. And that is good advice to tell them, I'm going to put it here, but I don't want there to be a surprise when I tell you it's going to have to drop 20 or 30K by this point if we haven't done that. And a lot of times if you set that expectation, that conversation will not be near as hard. But like Mark said, he's done it before where he just didn't do it. And then when he had to do it, they're like, you suck. This is not the way this should have been done. And I'm leaving, so that's what you don't want. You don't want that to happen. All right, let's see. We talked about, actually, Mark, that was great. I do have on the checklist where we talk about if it's 1978, do you have the lead-based paint addendum? So I'm glad that is on there. Here's one that we don't talk a lot about. This is a good takeaway from the show because, again, we pride ourselves on the show with not talking about the mainstream. We're talking about things we don't think you would get on your own. And this is one of them. This is a good one, too. This is a really good takeaway. And this is another thing that took me many years to find out. You always have to ask them, have there been any rooms that have been added? And you ask that because some of those people have done room adjustments and they didn't get a permit to do them. Now, this can become a big legal issue because if you purchase that house not knowing that, and then for whatever reason, something happens because of that room and you end up having it fixed or someone went to the city and they're like, that room's not even supposed to be there. Not only one, could you be in trouble? Now two, you might have to be the one that's responsible for the permit of that building. So, or that room structure. And here's something that's really scary. And I'm not going to get too much into this because there are conditions that have to be met. But those of you who buy a house that has a room addition that didn't have a permit, I've had insurance people tell me before that if something happens in that room, technically that room might not be insured because that was not part of the insurance policy when it was put in place. Now, I'm being very clear. This is a past conversation I had in passing with somebody where when they said it, I turned my head and said, what'd you say? But I'm pretty comfortable that that was the conversation, and it scared the hell out of me.
How can they fix that? Do they go to the city and try to?
It's not a position you want to be in, because one, what if they tell you that you can't have it? This happens a lot in the 3-car garages. So this is one I do know, and this is a good one to discuss. If you close in your garage and you redo that room and you don't tell the city and they find out that it's been done and it's part of the city code that you cannot do that, guess what you're going to have to do to that room?
Reconvert it. Yeah.
It's going to have to be converted back. That is painful. That's the ultimate slap in the face. You paid money to have it done, and now you have to pay money to take it out, and then you have to pay money to restore it.
Yeah.
That is not a fun situation to be in. So that's a good takeaway from the show. I mean, really, that was many years before someone mentioned that to me. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you, even to this day, I still get very uneasy when somebody tells me that they have a room addition. I'm like, was it permanent or was it not? I almost don't even want to hear it sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to hear about the damn room addition because now I don't know, what's the right thing for us to do there. Here's a good takeaway. It's funny. I'm always biased because you would think you like your own shows because they're your own shows. That's not why I like my shows. There are sometimes when I go through something and over all the years of documentation, I'll look at them. I'm like, that's a good one. I go, this is really important because it's not something that's taught out of a book. And there are several ones that I'm going through right now. And I'm like, that is a good one. That's one that these people need to know. So it talks about, have you verified you're dealing with all the owners? So this is something, this is definitely advanced listing presentation conversation here. This is not how you do listings. This is advanced. This is not 101 because you really don't find this out until you get in trouble on it. And I'm the king of getting in trouble, which is why I created all these things. So my guys never have to get in trouble. And I always tell everybody my claim to fame is I have to be the worst Murphy's Law guy. If it is going to happen, I'm the dude that it's going to happen to. Now, as bad as that sounds, that's what also makes you better too, because you learn from the mistakes. The more bad issues you have, the more tough issues you have to go through, the stronger you get over the years at understanding that is not how that works. This is one of them. So verifying the owners. There have been many times in my career where I'm sitting in front of somebody. It's either a friend or a friend of a friend, and I'm not aware of their personal life. They ask me to come in. They want to put the house up for sale. I show up. It's the one individual. The house is beautiful. They talk to me about their job changing. It's time to move on. They got to sell the house. I'm like, hey, no problem. This is an easy sell. Go through all the paperwork, put the sign in the yard, get a contract 2 weeks later, 20 days into the closing, best close ever, smoothest close ever, which there's no such thing. In fact, I get cursed now when I think a close is going smooth because I'm like, oh, now I just jinxed it. And then you get a call from the title company that says, as they're preparing to close, hey, when are we going to get the wife in here? I'm like, who the hell are you talking about? They go, you do realize he's married, right? I'm like, obviously by my expression right now, I do not know that he's married. So I pick up the phone. By the way, 4 times in my career, this has happened. This exact scenario, 4 freaking times before I had to put something in place to put a stop to it. That's how many times it took me before I'm like, I got to figure out a way to put a stop to this because this keeps happening and you wouldn't think that this happens. So pick up the phone, call the guy. I'm like, hey, I've got a big question for you today. Are you married? This is my favorite answer in real estate. All the years is my favorite response I get from someone. Well, technically, yeah. There ain't no technically in being married. You either are or you are not. Even if you can't stand being married, even if you wish that you were not married, you either are or you are not. I love it when someone tells me technically. I'm like, let me tell you about your technical BS right now. Right now, you and I are guilty of fraud, misleading people, not being able to sell this house correctly. That wife of yours, your supposed ex, can sue the living hell out of both of us right now for not vividly having her sign this document that gives authorization for us to sell this house. So now guess what you get to do? You now have to go call her and tell her what's going on. And I'm just so sure, and I say her, it could be he too. And I'm just so sure that she's going to be just so willing to come out and sign this document because I'm sure she wants to make, or he wants to make things easier on you.
I had that happen to me last year on the other side. On the other side, I was the listing agent and we were under contract and there were 2 names on the offer. And it turned out it was the guy and his girlfriend writing an offer. He was still married and didn't tell the wife about this offer. So we were, a couple days in.
Still the one thing I'm speechless on, it's hard to make me speechless. It is still the hardest thing that I'm speechless on when someone tells me that. And I'm like, why would you not have shared that information? I love this. Is the other one I love too. I love it. I love it when they tell me that they've come to a decision, even though they're not divorced yet. This is the one when you go there, they're holding hands and they're like, it just didn't work out between us, but we know we need to get this done. Beware of that individual or those individuals. Those individuals are one minor incident away from pointing a gun at each other a week later and saying, all bets are off. We are not splitting it now. I want all of your 401k. I want this to be done. And I'm not signing this until you do it. Don't ever fall for that one. That's the worst naivety in this business because those people, these are the ones like, oh, it just didn't work out. It's, we hate selling it. We love each other. And then they're like, they literally would shoot the other person the next day after they find out something about them. This is the life we live sometimes, and that is not cool. It's very tough for us to get in to that type of situation. So the answer to all this, the question you should be asking is, well, how the hell do I avoid that? How do I make sure that I am dealing with the right owner? And I love this conversation too, because you would think that there's an easy solution, but this conversation actually gets worse. So, I told you 4 times, I'm not some dummy. I don't just ignore and say, well, I'm sure that won't happen again. So I put procedures in place. The next time I put procedures in, I'm like, well, that's not going to happen to me again. Next time I go into a listing appointment, I'm going to make sure that I review the county tax documents to make sure who it is that I'm dealing with. So if I see any names on there, I can clearly state, I want to know why this person isn't here. So I thought I got all smart. And so I had that, and I went through and I verified, who the owners were and went through it. Well, then I get a call one time saying that's not the correct name. I'm like, what do you mean it's not the correct name? They go, he or she's been divorced twice in this last year. I'm like, God. I go, how am I supposed to know then? How can I verify if the documents haven't changed in that time frame? Because this person has had that many relationships in that year. How can I ever know who I'm dealing with? And y'all, you're gonna be surprised by the answer. The only answer that you really can do is to point blank look at the seller, whoever's in front of you, before they sign that agreement. Go, hey, I'm just gonna politely tell you, I need to know if you are only the one sole person that needs to sign that document. I need to know if there's anybody else, any partners involved, any spouses, any business part. I need to know, is there anybody else that could be affected by that document? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not telling me the truth, the only ones that are going to get hurt is you. You're going to be subject to lawsuits, fraud, deception. I need to know, does anybody need to be on there? And I'm telling you, over the years, most of the time they answer like 2 seconds into that conversation, well, yeah, I'm still married, or I haven't gone through divorce yet. But sometimes I have to go all the way through before someone finally says, well, I'm not, my divorce isn't through yet. I'm like, how long were you going to wait? How much longer of that conversation were you going to wait to tell me that you were divorced? I'll give you another final tip as we kind of cruise to end this conversation on this one. And this is another a show that we've been talking about when it comes to divorce. And actually, I'm kind of disappointed I talked that much about it, because I have a real good friend that does a radio show down in Houston that expertise is in the subject. And I want to talk about this. So you might see this very show. I have a rerun to it here in a couple weeks. But when you get through, when you're going through the divorce conversation and you're verifying who the people are, you have to make sure they understand that if they've just settled and decided on how things are going to work out, the only way I can absolutely legally believe that is if they are officially divorced already, or two, they have a decree. So the decree is kind of like the divorce isn't final because the courts are backed up, but it's basically said when the time does come, that's what's happening. So the decree is enough sometimes for me to go, I'm good with that. But I'm telling you right now, if there's any takeaway from this show, minus the divorce or the actual decree itself, you are playing with fire, not knowing what can happen with that individual, because that means they have not permanently decided how everything is going to be divided up. They haven't decided on the financials. They haven't decided about the kids. There are a lot of things that are still left out there. So that one is very, very tough. It is not an easy conversation. It's the scariest thing in real estate to be caught up in this. And unfortunately, we are the ones who are thrown smack dab in the middle of it. You know, I loved how this show panned out. I love doing these things non-scripted because they go so many different ways, and sometimes they're better than others. But this one today, that is a lot of good information for everybody out there. You know, you want to talk about takeaways. There's at least 4 or 5 takeaways from this show that literally could save you probably 10 to 15 years off your life, and maybe not make your beard as gray as mine before you get to 50. So really pay attention and rewatch the show. I want to thank everybody that watched the show. We have a lot of people who watch on archive, you know, anywhere from 400 to 600 people a week who go back through and watch the show. We're always really thankful. You always should spread to everybody else and tell everybody else that, hey, look, this is a really good show I watch. It really helps me. Always tell everybody else it is a good resource. It's not only a good resource for you, but it's also a good resource for your clients as well. This is your show just as much as it is mine to share with everybody so that we are all better in real estate. Thanks so much. I want to thank Brent and Mike for taking their time out of their days. It's not easy for them. The show is in the middle of the day, so it's very hard for them to plan their days. They're usually really available for us, and I can't do the show without them. They really do a great job. As much as I hate complimenting Mike, they do a very good job of bringing topics up that I would not have discussed, and it makes the show much better for me and for you guys as well. Y'all have a great week. Keep trucking along. Keep trying to do everything to where you're not worried about all the stuff that's out there, and hope everything's going well. We will see you guys next week.